Cave Johnson, new owner and CEO of Black Mesa. That's right, you've been bought. First order of business, we're renaming you under the Aperture brand. I'm leaning towards Blapature Mesa. Marketing boys think something else. So, Blapature it is. Next, they tell me you people are conducting some anomalous materials research that could result in a resonance cascade. So, I'm shutting that down before you idiots end the world. A resonance cascade. You're supposed to be scientists. Use some common sense.
What you just heard was not fan-made. That is a real voice line from the Perpetual Testing Initiative, which is basically the custom community maps for Portal 2 made with the built-in level editor. It has been a long time since I made a video for this franchise. The last video I made on this topic was in March 2016, talking about some of the things that I would want to see in the next actual sequel for the Half-Life universe of games, if it gets made, as well as some info on the current events of the storyline, with a few things I should rephrase from that last video. I mentioned the possibility of a backup rocket.
Already closed out launch support equipment checklist.
Let's go to the control room. We can get a great view of the launch from there.
This one. Flight termination system. Check links with backup range safety sites.
Oh, that must be an ancient entry. There are no backup sites. If we fail, the best we can hope is that the rocket falls on the enemy. Now, inertial navigation systems.
I talked about which characters are alive and which of them have their status unknown, as well as which select amount of characters that are aware of the G-Man, like Eli and Dr. Breen.
Gordon Freeman is a theoretical physicist who had hardly earned the distinction of his PhD at the time of the Black Mesa incident. I have good reason to believe that in the intervening years he was in a state that precluded further development of covert skills.
Unforeseen consequences. The last time I heard those words was back at Black Mesa. You had just stepped into the test chamber when he whispered them in my ear. You know who I'm talking about. Our mutual friend.
The Resistance has shown it is willing to accept a new leader. And this one has proven to be a fine pawn for those who control him.
No!
Don't listen to him, Gordon.
How about it, Dr. Freeman? Did you realize your contract was open to the highest bidder?
So let's get to the initial main points for this video. If you played or watched all the scenes of Half-Life Alyx, then you would see at the end she speaks with the G-Man, and he explains that he can change the timeline by nudging things in favor of his superiors, which he calls his employers.
Some believe the fate of our worlds is inflexible. My employers disagree. They authorize me to nudge things in a particular direction from time to time.
So let's go back to the first game, Half-Life 1. What caused the resonance cascade? Well, some would say that it was just the Black Mesa scientists pushing their equipment too hard. Well, what if I told you that the experiment wasn't supposed to cause a resonance cascade and run perfectly fine, using a regular sample and a normal output of the machine known as the anti-mass spectrometer?
We've boosted the anti-mass spectrometer to 105%. Bit of a gamble, but we needed the extra resolution.
That's the thing. The resonance cascade was caused by not one, but two of the G-Man's nudges. The first one being the crystal. Did you know that the purest and
the
most
most
unstable sample wasn't the original crystal to be tested? In fact, this was said in the last moments before the test. Probably about half an hour or 20 minutes before the test started.
Weren't you supposed to be in the test chamber half an hour ago?
Eli has been busy making last-minute preparations for the new experiment.
These last-minute changes, they're a bit strange to just... Oh! It's about to go critical!
The second thing that G-Man nudged to cause the resonance cascade was to tell the scientist team to boost the machine to 105%.
Overhead capacitors to 105%.
those are the two main factors that caused the resonance cascade. Even though the original games say that it was the administrator, aka Dr. Breen, that requested the settings for the test.
Dr. Keller.
Hello, Dr. Rosenberg.
I've been talking to Harold. He seems to be under the impression that you're planning on running the anti-mass spectrometer at greater than 90%. You realize there is a reason for the safety buffer.
I understand your concern, Doctor, but the administrator was quite clear.
The administrator is a bureaucrat, not a scientist.
Half-Life 2 Episode 2 gives information hinting that the G-Man was the one that requested the administrator to make the changes. Eli says that the G-Man delivered that specific sample, which is called GG-3883.
When he brought in that crystal, I knew I should have aborted that damn test, but I didn't. The whole world went to hell that day.
I understand your concern, Doctor, but the administrator was quite clear.
The administrator is a bureaucrat, not a scientist. I did not design this equipment to be run at such high intensity.
This is not your decision. Now, if you wish to stay and monitor the experiment, so be it.
Look, this guy who got in there survived Black Mesa. He raised holy hell and then just disappeared. We finally caught him and you're just gonna let him go again?
However, now that we have this perpetual testing initiative statement from Cave Johnson in the Portal 2 community maps, which take place in an alternate timeline, this leads to believe that if Cave Johnson was alive, he would buy Black Mesa to stop the test. But here's the thing, why would he stop the test without the previous nudges mentioned? Like I said, if the test did not have those two things, it would have ended up with a safe test, so there would be no reason for Cave Johnson to stop the test without them. That means if Cave and his company looked at the dangerous factors, which is 1, a dangerous crystal, and 2, dangerous machine output, he reacted to a planned test that had 2 of the G-Man's nudges. And if you read between the lines to what Cave Johnson said, it may refer to Cave shutting down just that specific test rather than the entire testing facility. Cave Johnson may not know that it was the G-Man who wanted a test to result in a resonance cascade, as Cave believed that it was just the science team who were the idiots that were going to cause it. Some people may think here G-Man's plans have been foiled and Cave saved everyone, but don't forget people, this is an alternate timeline we are talking about here, not the main timeline. And since G-Man can time travel and see different timelines, and Cave Johnson being alive in a different timeline to be able to shut down a test with 2 of the G-Man's nudges present, that could mean one thing. G-Man's response to Cave Johnson's actions was this:
"We'll see about that."
And then G-Man had to nudge one more thing in the way of his plans. That thing being none other than Aperture. Looking at the data of how Cave Johnson died, it was due to him not just being exposed to moon rocks, but how he got those rocks. He spent a massive amount of money to get them from somewhere else, despite his company being bankrupt in the main timeline, and yet he was somehow able to afford buying Black Mesa in the alternative timeline.
I'm Cave Johnson, CEO of Aperture Science. You might know us as a vital participant in the 1968 Senate hearings on missing astronauts, and you've most likely used one of the many products we invented, but that other people have somehow managed to steal from us. Black Mesa can eat my bankrupt...
Sir, the testing?
Right.
Now some of you people may be thinking, didn't he say he was bankrupt in the alternate timeline too? Let me give a slight correction. In the alternate timeline, he said that he was almost bankrupt.
Cave Johnson here. Every time I look at our test chamber production line, I am reminded of my father, and we are almost bankrupt. So, time for a cheaper approach. Allow me to introduce the multiverse. Infinite Earth with an infinite number of apertures. And as of now, they are going to take over all test chamber construction. And more importantly, all paying for test chamber construction.
This could be a stretch, but there's a difference between being bankrupt and being almost bankrupt. So, what caused him to go bankrupt in the main timeline? The best answer to that is the missing astronauts incident. In that case, why would Cave Johnson use astronauts? Reading the details, they were for testing, just like with most space stations and high-tech science testing programs.
Welcome, gentlemen, to Aperture Science. Astronauts, war heroes, Olympians, you're here because we want the best. And you are it. So, who is ready to make some science?
I am.
That eager voice you heard is the lovely Carolyn, my assistant.
I am also going to theorize that those astronauts were supposed to go to the moon to bring those rocks back to Aperture so that Cave Johnson doesn't have to spend extra money getting them from another source. So a theory for this is that G-Man made those astronauts either disappear or tamper with an Aperture test to get those astronauts killed. Likely because he wanted to mainly hurt Cave's company financially and to possibly prevent Cave from using them to get the moon rocks. Cave would then have to be forced not to just spend more money on moon rocks, but afterwards, since he had very little employees to spend money on, paired up with the fact that he could no longer hire top-skilled individuals like soldiers or astronauts, he had to do most of the work on the moon rocks himself, causing him to become poisoned.
Welcome to the Enrichment Center. Since making test participation mandatory for all employees, the quality of our test subjects has risen dramatically. Employee retention, however, has not. As a result, you may have heard we're going to phase out human testing. There's still a few things left to wrap up, though. First up, conversion gel. The bean counters told me we literally could not afford to buy $7 worth of moon rocks, much less 70 million. Bought them anyway, ground them up, mixed them into a gel. And guess what? Ground up moon rocks are pure poison. I am deathly ill. Still, it turns out they're a great portal conductor. So now, we're going to see if jumping in and out of these new portals can somehow leach the lunar poison out of a man's bloodstream.
This means that Cave going bankrupt so he wouldn't buy Black Mesa, and making sure he wouldn't afford proper medical treatment so he would not be alive in order for him not to get in the way, were nudges caused by the G-Man. With that, I am also going to include this theory. I believe that in some point in time before G-Man's nudges against Aperture take effect, the G-Man himself wanted to give a message to Cave Johnson and Carolyn. It is unknown when exactly Carolyn got hired as Cave Johnson's personal assistant, but reading the details, it is highly likely that it was years before this portrait existed, which is supposed to be made around the 70s, not long after this one. The 70s is also not that long after the missing astronauts incident, which took place in 1968 in the timeline of the story. According to this information here, Carolyn was with Cave Johnson before the incident happened, and G-Man probably gave Cave Johnson and Carolyn this iconic haunting message.
Prepare for unforeseen consequences.
Either he gave this message in person or told another employee to give Cave Johnson the message. It is possible that Cave and Carolyn may have seen the G-Man before, but if that is the case, then they believe that he was just a regular human being in a business suit. It is evident that they are unaware of what power he possesses.
You have no idea what that son of a bitch is capable of. You have no idea who the hell is he. He's going to be the one to fuck you up.
You want to know something else that's different in the alternate timelines of the multiverse? Carolyn is not Cave Johnson's assistant. Instead, it is someone else named Greg, who brought Cave the idea of the multiverse. So there's a chance that Carolyn being Cave's assistant could also be a change, since she doesn't work in Aperture as Cave's assistant, at least, in the alternate multiverse.
Welcome, test subject. It's Cave, Prime, from Earth 1. I am speaking to you from across time and space. I am literally in the future. Hold on. What? All right, my assistant Greg tells me none of that's true. Got excited.
That is not all. Another possible nudge from the G-Man is the disappearance of the Borealis. However, this could be a reaction by the employees to the recent troubles that Aperture experienced, as it is said that they rushed the company to possibly operate the vessel recklessly. But there is a large chance that the disappearance of the Borealis was another nudge by the G-Man.
It's the Borealis.
Good. God.
Incredible!
What? The Borealis? It's real?
Oh yes, quite real, despite its almost legendary stature. Our peers at Aperture Science were at work on a project of some promise, but in their rush to beat Black Mesa for funding, they must have compromised ordinary standards of risk. We heard their research vessel had simply disappeared, vanished, with all hands, and even part of the dry dock. Few believed the Borealis would ever be seen again.
It should have been lost forever.
Whether it was an accident or sabotage, I am leaning towards not just sabotage, but also by the G-Man's hands. You may pair this up with the Ratman's voice file.
It's coming, Stu! It's going to It's started! It's just started! It's done now!
Then you people may say, Mark Laidlaw said this wasn't in the script. But you need to remember, Mark said that he only had the script for a short while, and he says here, I could be wrong, which implies he didn't pay much attention to the script, and he probably forgot. Because also, let me add one more thing that the G-Man nudged for Black Mesa. Go back to Opposing Force. If you have seen the whole game, it shows that the Black Ops brought in a massive bomb.
Don't hurt me, and I'll tell you a secret. I've been hiding up here listening. These Black Ops have some sort of bomb. I think they're planning on blowing up the base. Now, why do you think they would do such a thing?
Be careful with that thing. One false move and this whole facility is gone.
And what did the G-Man do after you find it? That's right. Reactivate the atomic bomb that destroyed the Black Mesa facility.
The biggest embarrassment has been Black Mesa facility, but I think that's finally taken care of itself. Quite so.
So if he can do this, then he could be the one responsible for the disappearance of the Borealis, as the technology inside it may be the most powerful technology Aperture had, and the G-Man wanted to make sure that Aperture didn't have their hands on it, and so that Black Mesa and the rest of the world would have a hard time finding it. That technology was so powerful that it was the only muscle left that Cave Johnson had for him and his company to survive, only for it to be taken away. Despite how Aperture having the best inventions that they can create strong scientific technology in a casual and handheld portable way, along with having a sense of humor while doing it, their scientific power is nothing compared to the power of the G-Man, and especially his employers. So think about this scenario. If what I said about G-Man's message to Cave Johnson is true, imagine if you walked up to GLaDOS right now and said the phrase, unforeseen consequences. Another thing that the G-Man nudged for Black Mesa was to save Alex as a baby.
And now he's using my little girl, putting words in her mouth. God damn it. I should have known when he rescued her it was for his own damn reasons.
I should point out, in Half-Life 2 Episode 2, the G-Man gives a speech to Gordon Freeman. After he mentions getting Alex out of Black Mesa, he says this.
I have learned to ignore such naysayers when quelling them was out of the question.
This is a very strange thing to say, quelling. If you don't know what it means, that's a fancy word for suppress, extinguish, hushing, or even to kill. So this gives the possibility that before G-Man saved Alex in Black Mesa, he had quelled another party and naysayer against his plans before he chose to ignore those naysayers. If that is the case, then I can guess which naysayer got quelled. Yes, Cave Johnson's death took place before Alex was born. Speaking of sabotage, I also think that G-Man is partially to blame for the system crashes that Black Mesa had.
We've been having problems all over the facility this morning. System crashes, security malfunctions.
It's a wonder this whole place hasn't shut down yet.
I can't access my files. I can't answer my mail. I haven't even been able to get into my office.
The last system crash probably allowed G-Man to make the 2 changes for the test chamber.
I had a bunch of messages for you, but we had a system crash about 20 minutes ago, and I'm still trying to find my files. They were having some problems down in the test chamber too, but I think that's all straightened out.
Hello, doctors. It's nice to see someone is on time today. Dr. Freeman is running late. Again. Honestly, I do not understand what Kleiner sees in that boy.
I'm still not done. Speaking of G-Man and Aperture Science, did you know that in the earlier developments of Portal 2, Wheatley was supposed to mention the G-Man after waking Chell up by saying, "A man with a briefcase was just here to see you." So I can imagine that after Chell exits the facility and enters the surface at the end of Portal 2, the G-Man approaches her to give her a job and to have her work for his employers, and how he may mention that she's a very formidable survivor as a subject in contrast to the other test subjects that ended up dead. Now that I've covered that topic, let me go back to my previous video about the Half-Life series. In the video I listed certain characters that are alive, and I mentioned that Dr. Breen was one of them. I wasn't actually supposed to say that Breen was alive, although not in the way I intended it at least, because he was actually supposed to be killed on the Citadel when Gordon and Alex struck at the top.
Think, man! Think of the people below!
You need me.
However, looking at some of the videos other people made, there is a possibility that Breen may still be alive, but not as a human. If you have watched videos like this, and if you played the Half-Life 2 games, hearing Breen talk about
There he is!
then you would be inclined to believe that his brain or mind was put into a new host body. However, after Half-Life Alyx, some people believe that we may never know if that was really Breen, and Alyx might have killed Breen's host advisor body in the future. I am going to respond by saying, don't worry people, it is likely that this advisor is not Breen. Allow me to explain, and let's watch the ending of Half-Life 2 Episode 2 again.
Dad! Gordon!
As you can see here, the first advisor comes in to attack Gordon, Alex, and Eli. Let's assume that this first advisor is Breen. Eli then hopelessly retaliates against the advisor. Then when the advisor fights back, look what happens.
God damn it, let go of him!
A second advisor comes in. Then the first advisor approaches and then grabs Gordon and Alex, while the second advisor kills Eli. There is also the possibility that there are more advisors out there, which are also seen in the Citadel in Half-Life 2 Episode 1. So either the one that didn't get killed is Breen, or Breen is somewhere else. For another subtopic, I also speculated that when the Nehilanth said this,
"Their slaves we are, their slaves we are,"
I thought he was referring to the species of the G-Man, but in actuality it is the Combine, or for its more appropriate title, the Universal Union. You can also notice the mechanical devices under its torso, likely installed by the Combine, since he also says,
"Last I am last."
This further hints that his kind was driven to extinction by the Combine.
If the transhuman forces are to prove themselves an indispensable augmentation to the Combine Overwatch, they will have to earn the privilege. I'm sure I don't have to remind you that the alternative, if you can call it that, is total extinction.
Now, to the people that completely lost all faith that a Half-Life universe game with a number 3 on it would be announced, let's just say that if by some miracle that the game not only got truly announced but released and we got to play it, it cannot just be about finding the Borealis, which should be at best 10 to 25% from the start of the game. The game has to begin with Eli, Kleiner, and Magnuson reacting to the situation with the sudden disappearance of Alex and the destruction of the advisor.
Listen to me. Destroy that ship. Whatever it takes.
How Eli being alive and the destruction of the Borealis no longer becomes a dying wish, and instead, now that Alex has disappeared, he would have to be forced to use the technology to find Alex and stop the Combine with it. The game also has to involve with unlocking the Aperture Science technology and using the tech to get to the Combine homeworld in order to stop them completely. Only then will Eli tell Gordon to throw away the disposable tech when it is over. I say disposable because apparently Gordon may get Aperture upgrades that may be grafted and bound to his body, as what is hinted by the possible leaks.
We heard their research vessel had simply disappeared, vanished, with all hands.
The way Kleiner described talking about the Borealis vanishing, I think the technology inside it is more than a machine that can warp a certain amount of space around it, like the way Blast from One Punch Man warps things from one place to another. Not only that, but the Borealis could also contain a suit that can give the user plenty of new mechanics and abilities, not just the portal gun, but things like slowing down or freezing time for a few seconds for the user before recharging. But I believe its full capabilities cannot be activated without a special component. A core, for example, something like GLaDOS. That would be the opportunity for Eli if he and Gordon traveled to Aperture to be able to yell the words,
"Son of a bitch, it has unforeseen consequences!"
right before GLaDOS almost kills them or something, and see if she is familiar with those two words together, as what I believe what G-Man said to Cave Johnson.
A resonance cascade. You're supposed to be scientists. Use some common sense.
We'll see about that. Prepare for unforeseen consequences.
Do you know who I am?